Martinez.
Hello.
Thank you for letting me interview you.
You're welcome.
So, do you think that teaching students in their native language is important?
Yes. So like when going to school and stuff, they always told us that like as the kids like trying to progress like what they're learning, if they're learning in their native language, that's how they can make the connection of like for example doing it in English. Like for example, whenever it's ESL time for my kids, we review vocabulary, and sometimes for example I think it was yesterday, we were learning, I think it was like for peace, which in Spanish is guisante, but like since they saw the image of like the P, a lot of them like if I would have said peace, they would have not known what it was. But once they saw the picture and in English, in Spanish, they were like, oh, that's a guisante. Now, as I said peace, they can make the connection. Like guisante in Spanish is guisante, but like in English, it's peace. So that they can make that visual and that language connection. That like in Spanish is guisante, and now I'm learning that the English version is peace and stuff. So that's what like in a way is for them to mentally like make that connection between both languages, which is really helpful because they can like in their head maybe they might be thinking in Spanish, but as they do the output, they're practicing that English part because like in their head they have like an idea what they want to say, and now for them it's just to practice the output of like in English.
Yeah, so they have to go from Spanish, and then the visual like really helps because that's what we learn about. We're like visuals like always. For
Because
ELL
I know like whenever like we do, because we do our read alouds in Spanish. Whenever it's like the Spanish time for reading, and whenever I do ESL, I tend to do days to focus on grammar and days to focus on like comprehension, so which is like read alouds. And I do my read alouds like I use like the same for example like schedule, so they know that like before a book I show the vocabulary, and the vocabulary I always had them in flashcards that has an image, and I add like a movement to it. So yesterday how we had like the words like I think we had peace, stem, so like by me using like like a movement and actually having like a picture, they know that like in Spanish we went over that stem, in Spanish is tallo, and we went over that in science also. So like they have that background knowledge, and like the more that we use that vocabulary with them, the more they recognize it. Like, oh, okay, well, as I'm like thinking, like whenever I see the image, okay, that's a tallo, and since I'm hearing Ms. Martinez saying stem, I'm making that connection that like, okay, tallo, it's stem. So that's like a way for them to like make it easier for them to make that connection so that they can remember.
Yeah, and the movement is like a great idea because it's hitting like different learners.
Yeah.
So, cool. Do you use research in your classroom to engage instruction? Like, I mean, I know you just said like that you used research because their native language is so important. So.
Well, I know like I mean a lot of my college classes were based like on research and stuff, and like I just took a lot from that. So for example, they always told us like to use a lot of sentence stems, and so whenever I'm writing like on the bulletin board or anything of that sort, whenever I have them to do like an output, so for example speaking, I always have them follow a sentence stem. So for example, yesterday we did a KWL chart, I think like for peace, and so like the K, I wrote down what I know, and so each time a person was raised their hand to speak out, I always pointed out I know that, and everybody like even like regardless of like their like like their level at first, like they have to like say that like I know that, so they can know like okay, like I meaning like yo, so like I know that like that they make that connection. I know that I want to learn about, and I learned that. So even though it's like repetitive, now I hear them using it whenever like even I don't have to point at the sentence to them anymore. They're using it, so it's like adding more to their vocabulary in English. And after that, that's when you differentiate like because the students that have their English more advanced than the other ones. So that's when you like differentiate, so, like okay, like helping them out to expand more their English, and the other ones like have building those blocks, like adding more words to it. But I use sentence stems, movements, visuals. I go to conferences, and typically I go to the conferences for bilingual teachers, and whenever they talk about like like learning like the English part, it's like like having sure that they having like an output like either written form or orally, so they can just because one thing is them getting the input, so like you reading to them, you seeing them how like you write, but like they need to have that experience of creating that output, writing in English. Even like some of them they're like no, like I don't know English, but like I always tell them use your like sounds so that you can create that connection. So for example, I know that one of my students, he uses a lot of his like Spanish sounds when he writes, and from there on, that's when I help him make that connection. Like okay, so like I noticed that you use I, but like something that he might use like the AY as like I, because like in Spanish I. So that's when I go in and help him out and like, oh, remember like in English like I means like yo, so like it means like the capital I, and so now that's like strategies that I use to work with them and stuff. But at least like whenever I read it, I know what they're trying to say because they're making those words.
The sound connections. Yeah, that's awesome to learn about. So what do you think is the most difficult aspect of teaching ELLs?
I guess it will just be like resources, and just depending like resources, like what you know. That's why like it's really important to network. Like, hey, like I know you're using that resource. How does it look like? Or, I guess like also like since a lot of students come at different levels, because like at home, for example, I have students that at least one parents know English, and I have students that none of the parents know English. So like that's where I try to be like okay, like I guess like knowing how to differentiate so you can like impact all your students in a good way. Like like for example, I know one of my students, his parents don't speak English, they only speak Spanish, but he has an older brother, and with them they they talk in English. So just like finding like they're giving them that time to like actually do an output and actually like speak to them in English and have them practice their English. But other than that, it's just like resources, just finding those resources, like what works, what doesn't work, and like because each class is different. Like each year, it's different. So just like being that like consistency, like what are like resources that work and
effective.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.